afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Jack Birdsall's memorial service. I'm his son, Brian, and on behalf of our family, I would like to thank you for being here today. About 10 years ago, Jack wrote down his thoughts about a memorial. He wanted it to be announced that he was not religious and not affiliated with any religion, but that he maintained a complete and total belief in a spiritual leader he chose to call God. He asked that his friends and family lead the memorial service, and we've tried to honor his wishes today. Jack's niece Paula Hollowell will play a piece by one of his favorite composers, Franz Schubert. We'll present a narrated slideshow of Jack's life, read by a longtime friend of our family, Charles Sheldon. This will be followed by a musical interlude, and then written remembrances from some of Jack's many friends will be read. Finally, Brian Spellman will describe the art show and an opportunity to take home some of Jack's paintings. In order to allow time for the art show and the dinner, we will not be having an open mic during the actual service. But if you have a story or remembrance of Jack that you'd like to share, we'll have a video camera set up in the penny room to my left, and we'd love to capture it there. Once again, thank you for coming, and we look forward to sharing this time with you in memory of Jack. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say Jack and I used to like to play music together. So this is Schubert, his favorite composer, and this is for you, Jack. Jack was my uncle, by the way.
Life of Jack Birdsall. Yes, I really appreciate it. Is that the right distance? All right, thanks. Jack Bronson Birdsall was born in San Diego on August 19th, 1934. His parents, John Ely Birdsall and Barbara Bronson, were married 8 years earlier and had 4 other children by the time Jack came along. It was the midst of the Great Depression, and his family ran a small printing business on University Avenue. When they could no longer afford rent on the shop, the press was moved into the front room of their home at 407 West Washington. Jack's eldest sister remembers their mother operating the foot-powered press while she was pregnant with Jack. Perhaps this helps to explain his later fascination with printing and publishing. Jack's mother died of a bacterial infection less than a month after he was born. His father was overwhelmed by the responsibility and deserted the family, leaving Jack and his 4 siblings in the care of their grandparents, Arthur and Louise Birdsall of Linwood, just south of downtown Los Angeles. Being the baby, Jack was immediately taken into their home and had a relatively happy childhood, but the other children passed through an orphanage in San Diego where conditions were so poor that his youngest sister Nancy died there. Eventually, the remaining Birdsall kids made it to Linwood, and the grandparents tried to provide a home for them. Jack and his brother slept in the garage, while his 2 remaining sisters shared a room in the house. Things improved financially as the Depression era came to an end. Jack had many interests as a child. He started taking piano lessons when he was 7 and eventually became an organist at the Episcopal Church as a young teenager. He was fascinated by airplanes during World War II and began sketching planes in combat. Jack's grandmother Louise taught him to drive when he was 12, and he had a driver's license by the time he was 14. He and Louise shared a 1946 Ford Coupe, which Jack took great pride in, driving all over the local area. In the summer of 1950, Jack landed a job as a lifeguard and helper at Big Falls Lodge in the San Bernardino Mountains. Marlene's family came for a vacation at one of the cabins, and Jack first met her and her younger brother at the pool. He was able to get Marlene's phone number and began visiting at her home in Whittier that fall. He won her parents over because he was friendly and liked to help in the kitchen. After dating for a couple of years, Marlene and Jack both began attending UCLA. Jack initially lived in the co-op on Landfair Avenue, where the rent was $40 per month, and his roommates were 3 members of the UCLA football team, an experience he talked about for the rest of his life. Later, he moved to the house of Sigma Phi Delta, an engineering fraternity on Wilshire Boulevard. Jack and Marlene continued to date during this time, and Jack bought his first car, a used MG TC, which they both worked on restoring. Jack graduated from UCLA in 1956 with a degree in engineering and got a job at Douglas Aircraft in Santa Monica. He and Marlene were married on January 28th at the Presbyterian Church in Whittier, and they went on a California ski trip to Yosemite and Squaw Valley for their honeymoon. They rented an apartment in Santa Monica and lived there while Marlene finished her degree and started teaching home economics at Santa Monica High School. The newlyweds saved money for 2 years, and in 1958 they flew to Europe and spent the month of July traveling from Italy to Scotland in a newly purchased VW Bug, which they shipped home from Glasgow at the trip's end. This experience sold them on the European lifestyle, outdoor coffee shops, pasta, cheese, and winemaking. Returning home, Jack got a job at Litton Industries, where he began working on inertial navigation systems for aircraft long before the days of GPS. Jack and Marlene were now ready to start a family, and their son Brian was born in 1960 while they lived on 23rd Street in Santa Monica. Jack pursued his interest in aviation by getting a pilot's license and taking part ownership in a plane. Janine was born in 1962, while the family briefly owned a home in Pacific Palisades. But Jack didn't like the conformity and was looking for an alternative lifestyle. While commuting from the Palisades to Lytton in Woodland Hills, Jack discovered Topanga Canyon, and it seemed like the ideal place to pursue their dream of building an adobe home. Jack and Marlene moved their young family to Topanga in 1964 and lived at the apartments in Old Canyon, eventually becoming managers there. Many new friendships were formed during this time with other families living in the apartments or nearby. A highlight each morning was the putt-putt ride as Jack left for work and the local kids climbed on his car for a trip around the parking area. Daughter Sarah was born in 1966 and became a welcome member of the family as they enjoyed the natural beauty of Topanga on various hikes and adventures. Jack continued his winemaking experiments using first small half barrels for stomping grapes at the apartments, then graduating to a much larger vat when the Birdsalls moved across the street to a small rented house near Brooks Market. During this same time, Jack and Marlene were building their dream home on 3 acres at the top of Topanga Skyline Drive. They hired an architect from Santa Barbara and made the adobe bricks by hand, mixing Topanga clay with emulsified asphalt to make the bricks waterproof and drying them in in the sun. Jack did much of the work himself on evenings and weekends, hiring friends and enlisting neighbors to help when needed. There were many trials and tribulations during this period, like when the cellar excavations caved in, or heavy rains caused flooding on the property. But Jack and Marlene persevered with the building. By 1971, the house was finished enough to move in, although it took several more years to complete the interior. Jack was still working at Litton Industries and was sent on several overseas assignments to install navigation systems, first to Italy in 1971 and then to Israel in 1973. Marlene joined him for a trip to Greece, and they were briefly stuck in Athens when fighting broke out between Greece and Turkey. When Jack returned from his overseas work, the family took a long driving trip to Montana and Idaho in their new GMC van, which he had fixed up as a camper. Jack always appreciated natural beauty and instilled this value in his children. It was also around this time that Jack began collecting and repairing old Volvos, a hobby that occupied him for many years. In 1974, Jack joined Dynamite Sciences and became a vice president. Dynamic Services. Dynamic Sciences. And became a vice president. At DSI, he worked on a variety of projects, including navigation systems, train simulators, and radio receivers. This time of life was filled with many friendships at work, company parties, visiting with friends, and beach camping trips. The last grapes pick and wine stomp was held in 1982 with friends from DSI assisting. Back in 1969, the Birdsalls had taken a memorable camping trip to La Bocana in Baja, California, with friends from Topanga. In 1991, Jack and Marlene returned there and rented a small cabin from the Gomez family who owned the area. One evening, Sergio Gomez was sitting with them, admiring the sunset, when he casually asked, "Would you like to have a casita here?" Jack and Marlene looked at each other for a few moments and both said yes, which was a decision based purely on emotion. This was the beginning of many memorable trips to Baja as their casita was built. A worker friend of Sergio's built the entire house without the convenience of electricity, mixing the cement by hand and hand-sawing all the wood for the window frames and doors. Jack received the key to their new place from Sergio in the summer of 1992, and the elder, Mr. Gomez, came by to welcome them. Whenever Marlene and Jack arrived in La Bocana, they would take a deep breath of ocean air, and Jack knew that he was home. He enjoyed working on various projects here, reminiscent of building their home in Topanga, and it was an ideal place to pursue his painting, which he had taken up a couple of years earlier. In 1995, Jack took a trip to Hawaii with his sister Barbara. During this trip, he had a life-changing experience which he described in one of his books. One day, I went swimming with a mask and snorkel and came upon a big sea turtle, probably more than 3 feet in diameter. The turtle looked at me and then slowly began swimming away. I followed it through a beautiful winding coral reef, and suddenly we came upon a large fleet of turtles. They all looked at me and then zoomed away, leaving me alone out near the edge of the reef. A little later that day, I felt very strongly attached to my version of God. Clearly, a true pal and someone I now regularly thank when anything gets done. By the late 1960s, Jack and Marlene's family had grown to include 6 grandchildren. Jack loved his grandkids and received great joy connecting with them in any way he could, through jokes, hand gestures, sharing creative activities, playing games, camping, and traveling together. Jack specifically asked that pictures of his grandkids be included in this memorial service. Jack had first taken up painting in 1990 as a diversion, and by 1998 he had retired from engineering and enrolled full-time at the Santa Monica College of Design, Art, and Architecture. He enjoyed this experience immensely, and after graduation, continued to paint and draw in classes and with groups of friends. Jack participated in many group exhibitions and had 4 solo exhibitions, including one at the Topanga Canyon Gallery in 2002. He attended Alex Carrillo's life drawing workshop at Pierce College for over 21 years. Retirement gave Jack and Marlene a lot of time to travel. Their youngest daughter, Sarah, had married an Italian and moved to Italy, and they began regular trips to Europe for visits with Sarah's family and excursions elsewhere. As they became more adventurous, they traveled more extensively, and favorites were Greece, Sicily, southern Spain, and Turkey. The Birdsalls never took tours, but preferred to use ferries, local buses, the train, and sometimes a rental car. They stayed in rooms rented by locals or in little 2-star hotels. These trips also allowed a chance to reconnect with old friends now living in Europe. Jack also loved to travel in the United States, and his preferred method was camping. Over the years, he built many different homemade campers, either by modifying the interior of a vehicle or by creating a special purpose trailer or camper shell. Jack had a unique way of building his creations. And he preferred to use inexpensive materials like plywood, screens, and plastic. Over a period of many years, Jack camped with friends and family in almost every part of the western United States. On his 79th birthday last August, Jack's health seemed pretty good. He had just returned from a family trip to Oregon, and his main complaint was that he had difficulty remembering names. He and Marlene then traveled to Europe in October, seeing Sarah's family and visiting Croatia for the first time. On their return from Europe, Jack felt under the weather for several weeks and began to lose some weight. He slowly resumed his normal activities and felt well enough by December for a trip to Desert Hot Springs. On February 19th, a little over 2 months ago, he attended his art class as usual and, on the next day, set off with Marlene for a trip to their place in La Bocana. His sister noticed that he seemed ill when they visited on the way home, and he was admitted to the hospital on February 28th with a case of pneumonia, which was subsequently diagnosed as Legionnaire's disease. Tests while he was in the hospital revealed that he was also suffering from lymphoma, which had weakened his immune system and allowed the infection to attack other organs, in particular his kidneys. After a month-long struggle in the hospital, during which many friends and family members were able to see him, Jack passed away on March 28th with Marlene, Janine, and Brian at his side. His family observed that he had lived his life right up until the hospitalization, doing all the things that he loved to do. By Brian Birdsall.
I'm going to be reading a letter that Jack's brother John sent. He couldn't be here today, but he came to visit Jack in the hospital, and it was the first opportunity I'd had to meet him. And he wasn't Jack, but he's a delightful man, and he wrote this letter in lieu of being here. When you love someone close to you in life, there is always sadness that touches you, often very deeply and difficult to bear sometimes. But there's also a strange cycle that occurs. You look around for them and they are not there. You speak to them and there is only silence. But then the memories come to mind. Good memories stay, bad ones don't unless you dwell on them. For some reason, the vivid memory of us together with some other idiot stands out when we decided on one of our long bicycle excursions to explore the giant concrete storm runoff tunnels on the LA River. This is really a rather stupid idea, but seemed like a pretty good one at the time. In the dim light, we worked our way back through the trash and debris of past floods into the depths of the hills until gradually the light from the tunnel entrance faded. As we groped along the dark walls, someone, probably Jack, brought up the subject of baby alligators that some folks flushed down their toilets as their pets grew larger. Our fearful thoughts became reality when we heard some distant rumble in those dark depths. There was our terrible flight for freedom from some alligators. We scrambled back into the sunlight and didn't say much more about it. Then there was the music that Jack and I both loved, the classics, which we both performed very well, Jack on the grand piano and I on the flute. One PTA meeting, I had to recite from memory an essay I had written, and then Jack accompanied me on some classical piece. During the selection, I forgot my part at one point, and Jack brilliantly covered my mistake with the piano. Jack also played the organ in the St. Anne's Episcopal Church our grandparents sent us to. I carried the huge cross down the aisle and read epistles to the congregation from their big Bible. One Sunday, I came to a part that said, Jesus tied his ass to a tree and walked into town. We all knew that it was his little donkey, but when I read, the words didn't sound right, and Jack, unseen behind the organ near me, started laughing, as did the congregation, except for one old Scotch couple glaring at me from the front row. As usual, to Jack's delight, I stood there looking stupid. One summer, we even figured out how to get into vacant resort cabins in the mountains on one of our vacations there. By removing the wood box, we could gain access into the kitchens. Not sure why we did all of that, except that it was exciting, especially when we exited rather rapidly as a family was coming in the front door. It was all probably Jack's idea to begin with. He always was smarter than I was, and I always listened to him and his great ideas, often unfortunately. My brother Jack is now somewhere with Mom and Dad and his sisters and our long line of ancestors. I'm glad that Jack is a part of our big family. My children and grandchildren that knew him say, "Why is Jack so much nicer than you?" He always was a sociable guy. So today we leave our thoughts and stories of a good man with each other, and also our prayers for his family till their grief fades into memories. Goodbye for now, Jack. We all love you very much. We will see you again. Adios, amigo. John.
When I got a message from Janine that Jack was first in the hospital, and before I knew any details, I was overtaken by the sense of a significance that Jack had had on my life, and a story crystallized in my mind as symbolic of that. I'm deeply grateful for the whole Birdsall clan and their extended families, for my relationship with them, which has truly helped carry me through life. I'm honored to tell my little story today. I knew Jack for most of my life, since the age of 3, as the father of my oldest friend, Janine, and as a father figure who inspired and taught and cared for me over the years in many ways. We were fellow Leos with birthdays one day apart, maybe part of the connection. I can picture him working on the land, on weekends off of work, making adobe bricks in khaki shorts and a fishing hat. Hear him punctuate any statement with the cheery, "God damn it." And conjure in my mind a van ride up the coast with assorted kids in the back to pick grapes for the mythic wine stone. He made me feel welcome in his home and as part of the family. My dearest memory of him, though, is from a visit he made to my family when we were living in England for a year. We have an old story that we would dredge up from time to time, which probably began to make people cringe or yawn to hear us indulge in the retelling, but which I savored every time. I was 8 years old, and we took a walk around the London neighborhood where my family was living. We noticed signs that were posted at regular intervals, politely entreating the locals to keep their pets from fouling the footpaths. A reward of £10 was offered for information leading to offenders. And so we began merrily to calculate the veritable fortune in foul matter encountered along the way. It's not every grown-up that will joke about dog shit with you. We laughed together. I loved his easy and frequent laugh, and it felt so special to have that joke of ours. It wasn't the funny story so much as the fact that Jack had come to London on a brief stopover from a business trip to visit us. My sister, Margot, was hospitalized in critical condition with a raging autoimmune disease that would eventually take her life many years later. My parents were exhausted. We were all devastated. The family was in crisis and we were far from home. I don't know how Jack saw his visit, but the fact was that he'd taken time on this brief trip to spend an afternoon with his daughter's friend, an awkward and a little depressed 8-year-old girl, and made her feel that he valued and enjoyed her company. Not only that, but in reminiscing through the years about our walk, so meaningful coming at that time in my life, he kept alive and renewed our bond. There was nothing calculated in Jack's generosity of spirit and his enthusiasm for life's joys and absurdities. He just kept people in his heart and mind in a way that was simple and so profound. I will always keep him in mind, and I know we will all keep him in ours.
I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about Jack, because Jack was just really such a light in my life. It's just so much fun. You know, I first met Jack in the summer of 1980, and when I went to work for Dynamic Sciences, and he was, of course, my boss there. And I was just newly married, and Jack says, you know, well, why don't you go help me pick some grapes, and you know, next day we'll go in my backyard and stomp them. So, so I figured, you know, that's sounds like kind of fun. So Carolyn and I, you know, we drove up to Paso Robles and slept in the backyard of one of Jack's friends. I have to say there were some dog poop around, but we managed to make it okay. And then the next day, you know, we went to Jack's house, and we had a trailer full of grapes, which he put in that vat that you saw, and so people started getting in there and stomping grapes, and everybody was having a really great time. And then, you know, of course, after a while, your clothing became optional. You know, it turned out that you know, I had taken my mother-in-law there too. I think she wondered what kind of friends I had. So that was a great, you know, start of my experience with Jack, and you know, a few months later, I don't know why we were doing it, but for some reason Jack and I were fencing with you know, foils in the conference room at Dynamic Sciences. And you know, Jack was up on the table, and you know, I was down, and we were fencing away, and the general manager, Les Selmeyer, walks in the door, and he looks around, and he just rolls his eyes, shakes his head, and turns around and goes out. He knew what Jack was like. So, as part of my experience at Dynamic Sciences, you know, I'd like to say Jack was my boss, and he was, you know, in charge of writing, you know, technical proposals for Dynamic Sciences. And so he asked me to help him, and he gave me an assignment, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to really blow him away this time, because you know, I came to Dynamic Sciences after being a university professor where I'd written a bunch of papers, so I thought, I'm going to just blow him away, right? So I came there, and I had, I think, 5 sheets of paper. We didn't have word processing then. And you know, he takes a look and reads through it a little bit, and he takes out his X-Acto knife, and he cuts out just, you know, 5 sentences out of, you know, those 4 sheets of paper, and pastes it into his document. And I thought, you know, I was really, really ticked off, actually. So you know, it gave me another assignment. So I listened to what he had to say about, you know, how I should write this one, and I came back with about 5 sheets of paper, and this time, you know, I got up to 8 sentences. So at least I was getting a little bit better. So you know, I worked there for 8 years, and in '88 I spun off and formed company Systemware. And Jack was really supportive. I mean, you know, he was the type of friend that was really always there for you. And truly, you know, he was the only non-employee of Systemware that bought stock. And he bought stock right, you know, almost as soon as we started the company. He put in, $7,000, and it was, there was just nothing more precious than money at that time, of course, when you're starting a company up. And I know it paid off well for him, but he would come by probably close to once a month. And before he'd come by, and this was kind of all through our relationship, whenever he called me up and want something, he wouldn't, when I'd answer the phone, he wouldn't say, "Hi, this is Jack." He'd say, "Eh." And of course I knew who that was. So just like Dean was saying, we'd get together, we'd have breakfast a lot, he'd drop by the company and see what was going on. But like Dean said, you could maybe not see Jack for a half a year or even a year. And when you get together, it was like, you just picked up from where you left off. He was just such a special person that way. And, I'm going to miss him terribly. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wrote some things down. I entitled it Playful Jack Birdsall. When I was 13, I babysat for Brian, Janine, and Gaga Birdsall. I remember Jack and Marlene cheerfully driving off to the movies. I wondered how they maintained such lightness and optimism. When I was 19, I remember Jack came to visit the Surkars family in England, and we all went walking in Hampstead Heath. Jack was swinging his arms, singing, "I'm in London, I'm in London." I remember feeling a lot older than Jack. When I was 45, I attended art school with Jack in Santa Monica. One of his conceptual projects involved an automobile. It was that VW Bug. I felt that Jack was having more fun than any of the other students. He seemed free of the worries and constraints the rest of us were carrying. When I was 55, Jack offered to help me make a book. I'd go sit beside him while he managed the computer, effortlessly moving text and images around. And when I'd get up to leave, he'd say to Marlene, "Marlene, I don't think Megan is normal." And then he'd laugh that precious bucktooth laugh. And the last thing is that I visited him a few nights before he died at the hospital, and Janine had put a white cloth over his forehead, and Jack looked both beautiful and peaceful, and even the sense I got was that he was optimistic in his dying. Thank you.
Whew. I'm full of Jack right now. I'm Dave Ginsberg. I'd been in a couple of men's groups in the past, and they had all eventually run their course. But as of about closer to maybe 15 years ago, I felt a longing to have that kind of male companionship that's hard to find in our normal macho culture. So when I got an invitation to come to an established men's group, I was excited. I was excited and anxious. It can feel a bit like going to an interview being the new guy. Outside of a couple of guys I did know, there were more that I had never met. My anxiety brought up the possibility of even being rejected, Maybe the chemistry wouldn't be right. I headed to Topanga where I met Jack for the first time. He welcomed me warmly with his disarming smile and friendly voice, and in a brief amount of time it was apparent that I was now a member of this wild, crazy, and caring group. The men's group became a staple in my life, one that I needed and always looked forward to. There was a lot of serious conversation as we sometimes struggled with life's challenges, but we often shared deep laughter as well, and most of the time it was because of something Jack would say. He would offer a self-deprecating remark that seemed to tell us, in this life, we're often in over our heads, and rather than bang our heads against a wall, it's better to have compassion for ourselves and cut ourselves some slack. And when it came time to bring our meeting to a close, we would count on Jack to say something praising about all of us. We would then gather in a circle with our arms around each other and shout the phrase that Jack brought to us that became the unofficial namesake of our group. I'm not going to mention it yet. We didn't know what it meant, but we always left our meeting in great spirits. When Jack passed, even though I knew that he passed in grace, I was stunned. I had expected to have Jack as a supportive friend for many more years to come. A day or two after he died, I imagined sitting together with him and asking him what to do. I imagined him smiling and assuring me that everything is okay, don't worry. Amazingly, when I talked to Richard Seibert the next day, he told me that he had imagined a similar scenario. It pointed out how much we all relied upon Jack. I realized that without consciously thinking about it, Jack had always been a mentor to me. He had modeled many characteristics that I had wanted to amplify in myself. To be open-hearted, wonderfully creative, boisterously gentle, engaged with other people, adventurous in travel and experience. I know that all of us in the men's group, past or present, deeply miss him. But what he has given us all will always be alive in us, and we will always be grateful.
Well, as you already found out, I'm Richard Seibert. And, excuse me, I was the last member to join the group 12 years ago, so you can tell that we were a very cohesive group. We stayed together, and I too look forward to the meetings. I also was a member of several other men's groups before that. But there was one thing that was different about this one. This one had Jack Birdsall. That made it special. So I go to my first meeting, and like Dave, I was a little bit anxious, and being the new guy and all that. And we're sitting around in Myron's condo, and we're just doing small talk and boy talk, And then Jack looks over at me, smiles, he says, "You're the new guy. What's your story?" I took a couple deep breaths and like, okay, I got to tell my story. Well, you know how, you ladies out there know that sometimes men are have difficulty talking about their feelings. So when men get together, sometimes we ramble on. Yeah, I know it's hard to believe. But when that would happen in our group, Jack had a very disarming way of bringing things back. He got carried on, he'd kind of smile, and he'd look at the next person and say, "How about you? What's going on with you?" So then we very gently knew, in a very friendly way, that our time to talk was over, it's time for somebody else to share. So I really appreciate about that. I came to know Jack during a very difficult time in my life, a transition time. My 30-year marriage had ended, and he quickly became a friend. He was easy to like, and he became not only a friend, he became a mentor, and then he became a father. He always taught me not to sweat the small stuff, just take things in stride. He was a great role model in a lot of ways. I admired him for his honesty, for his humbleness, and he was very direct. He wouldn't beat around the bush, especially on the phone. Somebody mentioned before. Jack was like, okay, let's get right to it. He taught me how to have fun. I admired him for the hippie because he never grew up. He was still the hippie right to the end. The vagabond, he enjoyed life. Most of all, I admire the relationship he had with his loving family. And that was never more apparent to me than when I was at the hospital. And I really enjoyed feeling that family unity and the specialness. I'm going to really miss his down-home charm, his playfulness, that friendly smile with that hint of mischievousness. But most of all, his friendship. That's what I'm going to miss the most. So I'm going to ask two other members of our men's group, Jim Johnson and Myron Dial, to come up here. And we're going to teach you what it means to be a member of our men's group. We'll accept applications afterwards.
That was a wow moment. All right. Hi, I'm Brian Spellman, one of Jack's best friends. Jack was the best friend that I've ever had. I told him so. I never presumed myself to be the same to Jack because Jack was so easy to make lasting friendships for himself. He could disarm people, even strangers, with a mere greeting. Such was the immediacy of Jack's charisma. His was sincere, tolerant, and generous, offering it to all. I met Jack through a mutual art venue, Chatsworth Learning Tree University, today non-operational. Jack and I took the same course at different semesters, his months before mine. The instructor, Chris Meradian, invited promising students to his house for Saturday afternoon painting sessions. That's where I met Jack, spring of 1992. I brought one of my best paintings to the first Saturday class, an artwork just finished. Jack took a look at it and asked, "Do you think you'll become famous?" "I do." "Oh, shucks," I joked back. We quickly grew on one another. Over the years, we often mentioned that one of the appeals of our artistic and later life friendship was of returning interest in whatever mattered to the other at a given time. Neither of us cared for people that spoke exclusively about themselves. We always asked what the other was working on, so as pals we never got stale with each other, artistically or otherwise. When my painting inventory exceeded apartment storage allotment, I switched to digital art. Jack helped me to pick out my first computer and explained how it worked. He then coached me how to make and upload files to online publishing. I was skeptical, first saying, "I didn't know we were going to upload today. I just thought we were going to talk about uploading today." Jack punched a few of my computer keys and self-publishing was underway. The larger point is that Jack never dilly-dallied or procrastinated until he knew every detail before proceeding. He was a self-starter and doer, never stuck, a great example for worrywarts like me. I already miss Jack's help and companionship. His cannot be equal.
Hola, hola. Do you mind if I do this? I'm so short. No. I'm Vivica, and
I was Jack's acupuncturist and Qigong instructor and friend.
Get to the mic.
Oh! Let me just say again, I'm Vivica, and I was his acupuncturist and Qigong instructor and friend. I'm sorry to say I haven't even met Janine, and I've seen Brian, and I met Sarah at the hospital, but I've heard so much about all of you, and I'm so happy to finally have an opportunity to meet you. He often talked about how our families grew up in Malibu at the same time and loved all that we had in common. Can you see me shaking and my heart pounding? But I'm among friends, so, okay. This is the letter that I wrote to Marlene and Brian and Sarah and Janine, and they asked me to read it tonight. I will so miss Jack's smile, loving spirit, zest for life, and infectious sense of humor. I did not see Jack that frequently over the 4 years or so that I knew him, but there's a saying that goes, friends are not so much made as recognized. We both loved nature and food and natural health care and Qigong and art. He would often ride his bike over for acupuncture and sometimes brought fruit or a sample of his latest culinary achievement. He was kind enough to laugh when, to my horror, I left an acupuncture needle between his toes that he did not find until the middle of his art class in the evening. He laughed and said, "Thank God you're normal like me." They say you may not remember what a person said or did, but you will always remember how they made you feel. Jack always made me feel good, and I just felt good around Jack. He came for acupuncture, took my Qigong class in the park, emailed highly detailed health reports, often spattered with recipes for tabbouleh, hummus, and the like. He was full of food prep tips and showed me how to quickly and effectively remove the yummy seeds from a pomegranate. He spoke with such love and pride about you all, the fun times you shared in the past and would share in the future, going to visit the Italians, heading down to Mexico for periods of time with you, Marlene. He loved to spend time with you and do things with you, lifetime companions who built so much together I didn't even know until this evening. He was excited whenever he was going to see any of you kids, and he just loved you all so much. All I can say is, anyone who creates love, laughter, and gratitude all around him, and look at this, shares an all too rare and wonderful gift, and that's what he brought to my world. The gift of it is, it's always with me, and I'm sure with all of you whenever you think of him. Tom, my husband, and I feel for your loss of this beautiful man, husband, father, and friend, and wish you comfort and healing each day. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for those beautiful shares. I mean, it was just amazing. And there were so many people here, and they're from all stages of Jack's life. Here's Barb, his sister, who was already around when he was born. And then my brother Glenn, where are you? When he was a teenager, Jack would be coming around to the house. And I'm sure there's Phil Berger, who was at UCLA and in the engineering fraternity with Jack. And then on to Lytton. John Tamura was Jack's boss when he went to Lytton. And ever since then, we've had a little dinner group with four of the guys and their wives. And I think a couple of the wives are here today. And we still enjoyed those dinners together. And then came Topanga. Well, Topanga was our beloved home for 33 years. And we made just super, super close friends in Topanga. You know, it was just such a huge part of our lives. And then he went on to dynamic sciences, and that was a real fun part of our lives because there were just so many that wanted to party together and go to the beach and just have a lot of fun. You know, it wasn't all work, it was mostly fun, at least for the families. Yeah. And then more currently, you know, just all the friends we made along the way. You from wherever, whatever source, but it's just so wonderful, and my family and I are truly grateful for your presence. Thanks.